Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the AMA Phoenix. This is our first webinar, as we've all had to adjust due to all the COVID-19 precautions everybody's needing to take. Welcome. We're very happy that you're here. We miss seeing you all in person, so we can't wait to get back to some live events. But in the meanwhile, we will continue to have these webinars so we can stay in touch with everybody. And we hope that you find this valuable, and just keep checking our website, amaphoenix.org, for more information. And at the end of this session, we will show you some of our upcoming events, and just keep it in mind, May 20th will be our next event. And I would like to thank our sponsors. They make us as an organization possible to bring you programming. So thank you to Artisan Modern Color and Print, the Better Business Bureau, Bureau of Communication Design, Financial Potion, Made Better Studio, Point in Time Studios, Marketers, Imaginist Studios, and Ironwood Insights. We'd also like to thank our supporters. These are companies and individuals from these companies that really put a lot of time in with the AMA, again, to make sure everything, that we keep going, that we tick. So I would like to introduce Evelyn Vega, who is one of our board members and has been a board member for the AMA Phoenix for quite a while. And she is going to introduce our speaker. Evelyn is the president and founder of Staffing Strong.
Hi, everybody. I'm Evelyn Vega. I'm past president of Phoenix AMA, as well as Anna Bryce. And now I serve as the chapter's vice president career development. I was told to keep this introduction really short, and it's going to be hard because there's so much to say about Monica and so many things she's done, but I'm going to try. I've had the pleasure of working for Monica at a Hispanic ad agency way back in the day, and I've learned so much from her. Firsthand, saw her passion for marketing and all the hard work that she put into helping communities and businesses succeed. She's honestly, truly one of the busiest people I know out there. So I don't know if you know Monica, but she is the president and CEO of the Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. In this role, she's responsible for the strategic growth initiatives of the chamber. Prior to being named a president CEO in September 2009, she served as the vice president and executive director of the chamber's foundation, which also oversees their Phoenix Minority Business Development Agency and Business Center, and also the DATOS Economic Research Report, which we're going to be talking about today. In addition, over the past 7 years, she's also been an editor of 18 research publications. There's a ton of them. Also, she's been selected for many awards out there. One, the Latina Style Inc. Entrepreneur of the Year Award, also the ASU Entrepreneurship and Innovation Visionary Award, and also the Phoenix Business Journal Outstanding Women in Business recipient. So there's many more. She's also a founding principal at Research by Design, a marketing research firm specializing in primary qualitative and quantitative research, where she works very closely with client partners to develop category-specific studies as the foundation for marketing strategy decision-making. Monica resides in Phoenix, where she cares for her mom and her 2 kids. I'm telling you, she's busy. And also, I think, Monica, you got your PhD just recently, right? From USC? Oh, I think she's muted. Anyway, I don't know how she does it. One thing I'm going to make a quick note to everyone. I just want to let you know the benefits of belonging to an organization such as the Arizona Hispanic Chamber. They have provided such valuable insights and support to building our business. We are a member of the chamber. And as many businesses have been impacted by COVID-19 right now, the chamber has been a great guiding force for us through this. Our company, Staffing Strong, we were awarded a small business success grant through the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And this grant was made possible through the generous contributions of their partners, APS, Raza Development, US Bank. Sorry if I'm missing anybody, Monica, on that. But the success grant from the Chamber really helped us stabilize our business during this time right now. So I want to thank Monica and her leadership and her staff are just fantastic. So we're really, truly lucky to be part of this organization, really appreciative of the support. And they have a lot of great events out there too, guys. So if you wanted to check out what they're doing, go to their website. They have them posted. So without further ado, I give you Monica Villalobos.
Great. Thank you so much, Evelyn. I really appreciate it. Thank you to the AMA, Evelyn, Anna, Nat, and Taylor, who's working behind the scenes here to keep us all online. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I had to call my 8-year-old in here to help me log on because he's far better at this than I am. So we're all here. Again, thank you for joining us. This is it's a difficult time for businesses, and we're busy trying to provide resources. I have an amazing team at the Arizona Hispanic Chamber, and part of what we do and why we were able to provide those success grants were because of the research that we do, and we were able to share that with our corporate partners who invested. And to your point, Evelyn, those included APS, US Bank, and Raza Development Fund in terms of the seed money. And just moments ago, I heard from Comerica that is also joined on board. So little by little, we're getting those grants in, and we'll be able to flow those proceeds 100% out to our members. So we're excited about that. But thank you all for joining us. We're going to go through a lot of data today. I'd like to get through it because I know we started a little bit later. I'll get through all of it, and then we'll have a robust Q&A if that works for everyone. And we'll go to the next slide, Taylor, please. What you're going to be looking at is the roster of corporate partners that we have in Arizona. 10 years ago, we had 22. Now we have over 70 corporate partners. We estimate that there are about 90 Fortune 2000 companies in the state of Arizona. We have an investment relationship with more than 70 of them. And you can see when you're in this group, you're in very, very good company. And I think part of that is because of the ROI and the value proposition that we provide for all of our corporate partners. We really focus in 5 key areas, and those include economic development, market intelligence, capacity building, advocacy, and education. Today, we'll talk mostly about the second one, which is market intelligence, and how we really want to provide reliable, responsible, and relevant information to corporate Arizona, and also to our small business members who are making decisions on a daily basis about how to interact with consumers and how to provide and kind of make up their marketing partner, their marketing partners and marketing messages. So we're really excited about being partnered with all of these companies. Economic development is a piece that really has come into play, especially in view of the COVID-19 crisis. A big part of that is because our market intelligence kind of informs that economic development. The economic development piece really centers around our Minority Business Development Agency, and they do some amazing and incredible work there. Just so that you know, we operate the only minority business development agency in Arizona. There are 25 of these centers across the country. Their national impact goal, as dictated by the U.S. Department of Commerce, is $4 billion, and that's measured quarterly on 3 things: access to contracts, access to capital, and job creation. We are the top performing center, and out of all of those 25 centers, they're supposed to make, on those 3 measures, $4 billion. We are able to produce $1 billion, or 25% of the goal for all 25 centers. So that economic development for us really resonates. It's absolutely critical to keeping Arizona's economy moving, and we're excited to be a part of it. Because of that work now, we're doing a lot more in the American Indian community, Native American community, not only in Arizona, but also in Nevada and Utah as well. So again, because of the work of all of these sponsors, we're excited to be able to help small businesses, not only in our state, but in 2 other states as well. Next slide, please. But as I mentioned, we're really going to talk about market intelligence. And for 22 years, SRP has been our underwriter and has really believed in our market intelligence work and the work that we do to provide good information, again, not just for corporate Arizona, not just for small business members, but also for legislators that are making public policy decisions. In the last 8 years, we have put out 18 marketing and research publications. These include primary and secondary research. So the first one is our flagship publication, and again, as I mentioned, SRP has been part of this effort since the beginning, for 22 years. And 22 years ago, when all of this started, it was an idea. Sandy Fernisa was the president of the Hispanic Chamber, and they were getting a lot of questions about Latinos in Arizona, and they decided to create, some basic information. And it was a few pages. The first DATOS was about 50 people in attendance. Gema Duarte Luna, Rhonda Carrillo, Sandy Fernisa, as I mentioned, and of course our beloved Dr. Olivas was part of that first execution of DATOS. Since then, we've grown it. The event now draws about 1,200 people. Obviously, this year, we've had to push it back. So you can expect that the event to release this year's findings will be in October or November. And so we're really excited to be able to share those findings with you. DATOS is the most comprehensive compilation of secondary research on Hispanic consumers in Arizona. No other chamber in the country does this. We're super excited to be a part of it and to be able to develop this and produce it for Arizona. In addition to that, we have primary research. The 4 publications to the right of your screen include the Minority Business Enterprise Study. These are the 4 reports that were a product of that study in 2012, where we surveyed 800 minority-owned businesses in the state of Arizona. This hadn't been done since 2007, so it was a great pre- and post-recession analysis. Our hope is to secure the funding needed to be able to go back into field. But there were some really key learnings from that primary research. And one of the things I love about primary research as a researcher is I get to design the questions and ask them, right? As opposed to secondary research where there's somebody else's questions and somebody else's data. So in that Minority Business Enterprise Report, we found that 56% of minority-owned businesses are family-owned. And there's a huge lack of succession planning. You'll hear me say that over and over, that data point, because there is a desperate need for minority-owned businesses, and we're seeing it now, where family-owned businesses don't have the sustainability that they need to continue doing business in the state of Arizona, whether it's from a structural standpoint or from a financial standpoint. So one of the things that happened is we interviewed businesses, and oftentimes they were mom and pop type shops, and we'd say, why did you start this business? And they would say, oh, well, for my children, to leave a legacy. This is, I'm doing everything for them. I've sacrificed my entire life to put everything into this business so that my children can have it and they can run it when I'm gone. And we said, that's wonderful. It's very admirable. And then we went to the kids and we said, so what do you think about this business? And they said, I don't want anything to do with this business. So there was a real kind of lack of communication, and it was a good learning. From that, we sliced and diced that data and created the Minority Women-Owned Business Report, the Family-Owned Business Enterprise Report, and the Hispanic-Owned Business Enterprise Report. Then the section in the middle is really our best practices for corporate Arizona, and creating white papers through our collaboration and conversations with subject matter experts in supplier diversity, employee resource groups, sustainability, global trade, and our economic indicator report. That last report, the purple one that you see the cover on the screen there, really we worked with economist Jim Rounds here locally, and what we were able to do is take a lot of the reporting that we had and calculate the ripple effect on the economy in Arizona as a result of minority-owned businesses. So Great stuff. So that just gives you kind of a foundation of what we do. I put a lot into that and explaining that because we're often very different than other chambers of commerce in what we produce and the information that we provide. So we'll go to the next slide. I just wanted to give you a quick mention. Often people are, what's the secret to success? DATOS, the publication, is a 10-month process. These are the subject matter experts that work on DATOS for a 10-month period. Only about 25% of the data we collect actually makes it into the publication. And so we're sitting on another 75%. And the exciting thing about this year is that we're rolling out our DATOS Total Access, which means you will have direct access to 100% of all of the information we have through our subscriber model. So it'll be a digital platform. You'll be able to go in, search, do a search for a particular word or topic, and then you'll have all of that information. This group here is particularly important because they really help guide the conversation, the data, and making sure that we're crossing all of our T's and dotting all of our I's. So we're always very grateful to our DATOS committee and the volunteering that they do on this committee as well. They give us access to databases that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars that we wouldn't otherwise have access to. So it's a pretty elite group. I always say these are some of the smartest people in Arizona. When you get them all in one room, there's some wonderful ideas and information that come out of it. So a special shout out to them. And because of them, we are able to shape the data. And if we go to the next slide, you're going to see a portrait of the American Gothic by Grant Woods back in the early 1900s. On the right is a wonderful portrait by Griselda Vasquez, and she's calling this the New American Gothic. And oftentimes when we talk about Latinos in the United States, that image on the right is the one that most people gravitate toward. They see us as laborers, blue-collar workers, etc. But the truth of the matter is, on the next slide, you will see that Latinos are really making their way into courtrooms, operating rooms, boardrooms, classrooms. This is really that New American Gothic, and this is the face of Latinos in the United States and all of their contributions. And I'd like to just, share some of the data with you over the next few minutes, and I want to be very cautious of time. The next slide shows you how we look at our data. So for years we had all of this data, and some of the response we got was, wow, that's so much data. It's very overwhelming when you share it. And so we partnered with Vitalist about 2 years ago. They brought a wonderful national best practice to Arizona called the Elements of a Healthy Community. And these are all the social determinants that impact healthy communities. And so rather than just thinking about healthcare, it's important to think about social justice, education, housing, all of those important things that really impact a community. And it allowed us to have a different lens on the data and for it to become much more actionable. One way that it did that, for instance, is we know that 10% of US Hispanics are food insecure or live in a food desert. So now the conversation, when we go to one of those 70 plus corporate partners that want to do a food drive or are food retailers, and rather than asking them to sponsor the local fiesta, and believe me, I'm the first one at the fiesta, I love to have a good time, but a more important conversation with partners is, here's a zip code. We need a market with access to healthy fruits and vegetables, to fresh fruits and vegetables in this neighborhood. That is a much more powerful and productive conversation. And that's what the data allows us to do when we look through this lens of a healthy community. If we go to the next slide, you'll see some primary research we did with our partners at West Group Research. We took all of those elements, those 12 elements of a healthy community, and we polled Arizona. And what we found is that when we look at the importance of these different things, education, healthcare, and economic opportunities are at the top of the list. That is what Arizonans say are the most important important elements to a healthy community. Well, this becomes an issue, particularly in education. If education is the #1 element and you're ranked 46th in the country in terms of educational achievement in K through 12, that's a problem, that's an issue, and it's something we need to address. So again, this allows us to look at the data in very, very different ways. Let's get into just some of the demographics briefly. We'll go to the next slide. And if there are 4 numbers that you remember when you kind of walk away from this conversation, I hope they're these 4 numbers. And we know that in the US, there are about 60 million Hispanics. This number does not account for the 3.5 million in Puerto Rico, nor does it account for undocumented. So this number is substantially larger. In fact, we know that 1 in every 4 births in the US is to a Hispanic mother. So again, largely becoming the largest majority of the population. We also know that if all US Hispanics were their own country, of the 233 recognized countries globally, US Hispanics would be 25th. So, you know, that's really important when you think about the growth and the future of the United States. In addition to that, there's spending power is significant. $1.7 trillion in spending nationwide. And again, we use very conservative numbers because we have this subject matter group of experts. We know that these numbers are conservative. We never want to kind of inflate those numbers at all. So we use them very, very conservatively. So even at 1.7 trillion, that is more than the GDP, gross domestic product, of both Australia and Canada. So if you think of GDP as income that's produced by a country, US Hispanics spend more than Australia and Canada produce in GDP. So it's, you know, again, we can see that there's a lot of spending power. You know, I often say that during the Great Recession, when you look at all trajectory, Hispanics continue to spend quite a bit of money. So that recession thing had nothing to do with us because we continue to spend money. In Arizona specifically, we have over 2.2 million Hispanics. Again, we're about 30% of the state, 40% of Phoenix, and more than 50% of K through 12. So definitely the future moving forward. We're contributing almost $50 billion to Arizona's economy. Again, that purchasing power is absolutely critical as you talk to your clients in marketing and advertising. Leaving this segment out of your marketing plan is a grave error. This is the future. This is the growth driver for most products and services, and messaging to this group is absolutely critical. And I know with at the AMA, you're all very concerned with the kind of messaging, and I'm sure in the Q&A we'll talk about transcreation and transliteration and all of those good things that come with marketing. But again, to give your clients a good picture of what's going on in the US and in Arizona, I think it's really important to look at this. You're all going to get a copy of this slide, so I'm going to ask Taylor to jump to slide 14, just in the interest of time, and I want to make sure that we leave plenty of time for Q&A as well. So if we go to slide 14, which is titled Number of Hispanic Businesses in the US. One more, I think. There we go. Thank you so much, Taylor. She is driving for me today, so I really appreciate that. We know that in 2002, there were about 1.5 million Hispanic businesses in the US. In 2018, just 2 years ago, there were 4.65 million businesses in the US. So between 2012 and 2018, there was about a 40% increase in Hispanic-owned firms. During that same period, all other firms only grew about 18%. So you can see that we're doubling the number of businesses that the general market has. So these businesses are critical to the economy. They grow 3 to 4 times faster than other businesses. And we've got some, sort of ideas as to why that is. And the next slide will show you that Hispanic-owned businesses not only have doubled, but 1/3 are owned by women. And women are really driving this. One of the thoughts or theories around why there's so much growth in Latino businesses is because in the Great Recession, well, let me back up. Until 1987, a woman required a man's signature on a business license, which I know to all of us seems absolutely ridiculous. Not maybe to the men so much, but certainly to the women. And what we know is that women at those businesses during the Great Recession that were owned by men kind of went to the wayside. They had less sustainability, less ability to carry themselves through that Great Recession, and women really stepped up. At that point, we saw that huge increase in Hispanic women-owned businesses, very much like the Rosie Rivets scenario during the war in the mid 20th century, when women stepped up into the workforce. This is sort of what happened in business. Women stepped up and said, these other businesses are going by the wayside. We need to be able to make up for that difference. And suddenly their side hustles, whatever they did on the side, whether it was making tamales at home, whether it was sewing, whatever it was, suddenly became a legitimate business, and women started to legitimize their businesses. We saw that emphasized even more in Arizona. The other thing about businesses, and we'll go to the next slide, is that more than 40% of Hispanic businesses in the U.S. that make more than $1 million in annual revenue are immigrant owned. And so this is really critical to, I won't get into the political controversy over immigration, but I will tell you that when it comes to our economy, immigrants play a very important role, not just as the workforce, but as business owners and starting these businesses that are very, very successful. Let's bring it back a little bit to home here in Arizona on the next slide. And what you're going to see is that between 2007 and 2012, while all firms, and again, this is really basic census data, all firms grew about 2%. Minority-owned firms grew 60%, Hispanic-owned firms grew 70%, and Hispanic women-owned firms grew 116%. So, when you digest that just a little bit, that's really critical growth in the minority business segment. It's one of the reasons that we exist at the Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. We've been around for 70 years providing resources, seminars, consultation, contacts, anything you can possibly imagine to help these businesses grow. There is a perfect storm brewing that I often talk about, though, and that's on the next slide. And here's the issue. You've seen the growth. Hispanic-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses are growing much faster in units than non-minority-owned businesses. So if we go to the next slide, Taylor, you will see this perfect storm that's brewing, and that's this. Minority-owned businesses, on average, make about $110,000 in average annual revenue. Non-minority owned businesses make about $500,000 in average annual revenue. That gap, in very simple math, is about $6 billion not being realized in Arizona's economy. So we've been talking about this for years, probably 2 or 3 years, and the importance of being able to scale minority-owned businesses. JP Morgan Chase Research Institute did a study, and they indicated that small businesses in general only have about 2 weeks float or reserves, meaning if some catastrophic event happens, they have 2 weeks to keep their business going. Now, that's for the businesses that are making $500,000, small businesses. Imagine businesses that are making $110,000 in average annual revenue. They have even less than 2 weeks. We're going into week 8 now of this COVID crisis, and you can imagine where these businesses are. So when Evelyn earlier spoke about these success grants, we knew immediately we needed to jump into action create a fund. We were able to disseminate $100,000 to 66 businesses in 2 weeks. And the idea is that as long as that fund exists, we will continue to pass through that money to small businesses in the amounts of $1,000 for 6 total, to be a bridge. Because what we don't want happening in this scenario, when you look at these financials and you look at the financials of these minority-owned businesses, what ends up happening is they go to predatory lenders. And we just had a case where we had a member who took out a loan for $10,000 at 50% interest out of sheer desperation. And we were just heartbroken because we know that there is a better way. And businesses are getting so incredibly desperate. And so we want our members to know they've got a bridge to get whether it's PPP or traditional lending with decent interest at the very least. And our message to members has been, do not wait for the government to bail you out here. No one is coming to us. We need to save ourselves. And that's why it was important for us when we look at these numbers and we know the odds that are against minority-owned businesses to be able to create a fund for them and to be able to create at least a reserve or a float to get them to that traditional date. So we're hopeful that businesses will continue to succeed. But this perfect storm is exacerbated by the fact that I mentioned earlier, which is that our K through 12 is now more than 50% Hispanic, and we're ranked 46th in the country in terms of educational achievement. So who do you think those future entrepreneurs are? Who do you think the future workforce is? They're sitting in a failing K through 12 system. And that's a critical problem we have in Arizona for a number of reasons. I always bring it home and really clarify it by saying, who do you want holding that hypodermic needle when you're in the nursing home? Do you want it to be someone who was in a failing K through 12 system? Or do you want it to be somebody that was well educated? And not just that, it's also that when we look to court big businesses, when we bring them to Arizona, think, wow, cheap housing and sunshine all year round, it's amazing. We'd love to live there. But they come with employees, families who want to go to good schools. And unless we can solve that K through 12 problem, we're going to have economic issues moving forward. Again, not just for our own workforce, but for companies that come to Arizona and that want to be profitable here, right? And want to have a good education. So this is something that we've been really grappling with. It keeps me up at night. It's one of the reasons I do what I do, making sure that we're providing those critical services. Let's talk a little bit about COVID on the next slide. The COVID crisis has created some real issues, obviously across the country. Here in Arizona, it's really hitting home as we see businesses that start to close. The PPP funding, as I mentioned earlier, is not going to save Arizona businesses. Maybe the third or fourth round will. But we activated fairly quickly because we saw what these numbers are. Not only is Arizona among the states receiving the least amount of PPP funding, but they're also receiving less than unemployment claims. And on this chart, what we see is that you want to balance, right? You want to be able to be reaching as much in unemployment you are with the PPP to balance out the shutdown, and we're not doing that. We're not getting enough PPP funding here in Arizona. There are a lot of folks that can speak far more intelligently than I can on PPP. What I can tell you is that from a membership standpoint, from a small business standpoint, it's too little too late is what's happened. And our businesses have had to really fend for themselves, as they have, to be able to get the funding necessary to keep their businesses going. I have another section on healthcare, and I just want to do a quick time check. Taylor, I don't know if or someone wants to send me a quick message and let me know how we're doing on time, because again, I want to leave a good Q&A. Last year, we really focused on healthcare and the importance of healthcare as a social determinant of a healthy community. This year, we will focus on education. And the importance of that is that, you know, again, education is that number one issue. When people look to us, they think, you know, why is a Chamber of Commerce so interested in education? Well, those are our future, you know, that's our future workforce, our future entrepreneurs. And we want to make sure that they're getting the education. This year's DATOS, in whatever format it ends up being, whether it's in person or online, we have asked Dr. Victor Rios, UC Berkeley, to come and speak to us. He has some wonderful information and data around the systemic failures and sort of in education, and that it's an issue of being pushed out, not dropping out. And I think that's a very different perspective when we think about education. I covered just a little on health there because it doesn't look like we have any questions yet. If you do have questions, please feel free to put them either in the chat box or the Q&A box. Well, it looks like there's a chat box. So please feel free to put them in that box, and we'll get to answering them. So I'm going to do just a few more minutes on healthcare, and then we'll get to the questions if that works for everybody. Next slide, Taylor, is on healthcare. We know that as we learned about healthcare last year and kind of the differences, we're seeing a lot of the impact from Obamacare and ACA. We know that 40% of small business owners really state that healthcare is their greatest challenge. And when we look at unemployment numbers, you know, and there's a lot of media hype around how unemployment numbers are down, it's really important to dig deeper into those numbers, because what we discover is that while unemployment as a whole may be down, part-time employment is higher. And why do I bring that up? Well, if you're a part-time employee, you're not getting health benefits that you need. And this is one strategy that business owners utilize to be able to keep those costs down. And as you know, having multiple part-time jobs, and many people have 3, 4 part-time jobs, it's much more difficult not just to get around and, you know, kind of make time for family and all of those things, but you're not eligible for medical care either. Many employers are just unable to provide that healthcare for their employees, and that's why they're hiring those part-time employees. The rising costs, you know, are also a very big issue that's impacting Hispanic businesses, and frankly, all small businesses as well. If we go to, we did see a substantial decrease in uninsured among Latinos. So it used to be at about 28%, or almost 1/3 of Hispanics were not insured. Now we're down to 17%, which is very good news. And so that's a good thing. I think that some would argue, though, there is still a lack of access. And what we really explored in DATOS last year was there is a difference between having access to health insurance versus having access to good medical care. So as you can imagine, in poorer areas, there weren't those medical facilities, those quality physicians to be able to make that difference. So even if you had health insurance, you didn't have health care. And that was one of the biggest issues. When we look at Latinos on the next slide, one of the biggest barriers is that they don't have insurance, and that there just isn't enough insurance. But there's also this barrier, cultural barrier to the medical field for Latinos. And Equality Health, one of our corporate partners, does a lot of work around cultural competency in medical care. One of the things that we know on the next slide, whoops, sorry, I skipped that slide. There we go. One of the issues that we know on the next slide is that only 10% of your health issues are caused by biology. The rest are physical environment, clinical care, healthy behaviors, social and economic factors. Again, all of those social determinants that we talk about really are the key. And when we address those, then we can address healthy communities. As I mentioned, there are different barriers and cultural barriers. So one of them, for instance, on slide 25, that's 2 slides, Taylor, is the idea of going to a health clinic or going to a doctor. 20% of all Latinos feel that they're discriminated when they go to the doctor or health clinic. And this may be as simple as, again, other cultural barriers that come to play. I know, for instance, on the next slide, that 52% of Latinos that are making under $35,000 a year tend to take someone to the doctor for them. And so if you are Hispanic and you've ever been in the hospital, you know that hospital rooms are just way too small. When we're in the hospital, we got the whole family with us. There are like 12 people in the room at a minimum at any given time. And, hospitals and doctors' offices just aren't equipped for that. And a real cultural, a lack of understanding. God forbid somebody has a baby, because then everybody has to go to the hospital to see the baby, right? And now that's going to be even more difficult given the pandemic and all of the precautions. So, a lot of that discrimination is felt when people are thrown out, guests or visitors are thrown out of hospital rooms when they're visiting a relative or whatnot. So we have a lot of work to do in that area. I'll go ahead and just finish up on the last slide. And actually, I'm looking at slide 28. You just passed it. Oh, you gave away the punchline there. Slide 28. We work with a group called Oye Intelligence. They are part of our DATOS committee. And they did kind of a survey around what are people talking about when it comes to healthcare. And they have a wonderful system that spiders into the web, onto social media, and it looks for search words. In this case, it was healthcare. What are people talking about? And then it segments it by bilingual, English, and Spanish. And we saw that both in bilingual and English, the biggest topic was customer service when it comes to healthcare. That's a really important component for Latinos that hasn't really been addressed. I know that at the last DATOS, we had 2 doctors from Mayo Clinic that placed a lot of emphasis on culture in healthcare and the work that we can do as Latinos in preventative care. There are a lot of taboo topics, and making sure that Latinos are able to really get into doctors sooner, talk about those taboo issues. In healthcare, marketers are really understanding that importance of cultural care, not just medical care. And finally, my punchline slide is the next one, and that's that we all use Vapuru, we all use Sana Sana Colita de Rana, and those are wonderful remedies that have been passed down from generation to generation. But we also know that our Latino families and our culture, that we can do better, that we can provide better access to healthcare by working with our corporate partners, by working with healthcare facilities, to really show them what it is that our community needs, not just from medical care, but from cultural care as well. And with that, I'm going to end. I see there are some questions in the chat box. Actually, if you can take us to our next slide, Taylor. I just want to thank everyone for listening, for being a part of this. Also on the next slide, you'll see all of our social media handles, and we ask that if you felt this information was useful, if you found a factoid that was of particular interest, please shout it out via social media, and be sure to tag us. Thank you all so much again. I'm going to go over to the questions, and I don't know if we have a moderator or if you want me to go through the chat box and try to answer some of these questions as they came in.
Well, thank you, Miss Monica. That was amazing. One of the first questions we have here when you were mentioning the Hispanic market is, what are some of the differences marketers need to keep in mind when speaking to this audience segment?
Sure, and that's a great question. People always say, what should we call you? Should we call you Hispanic or Latino or Mexican American? And my response is always the same, which is, I don't care what you call me, just call me to the party, like invite me. And I think Mark often forget to make that invitation to the Latino community. When you look at the return rate on things like direct mail, Latinos receive less direct mail, means you stand out of the noise, if you will. They're much more prone to respond to advertisements. And so I think, marketers really need to understand that the ask is not assumed on the part of Latino communities. So you have to invite them to do that. And there are different ways to do that, right? In the messaging, certainly, this idea of bilingualism. I think it was, Toyota did some really great work early on in bilingual, bicultural commercials. There's a whole different presentation that I do on politically incorrect advertising, and it's, a lot of it is early on, a lot of it's kind of from the 60s and the 70s, some in the 80s, but there are some real tragic advertising campaigns that came out that clearly were not vetted. I don't know that anybody was consulted before they came out, but they ended up being very disastrous. I think the ones that come to mind are, Got Milk, which is a more recent one. And in Spanish, they said, tienes leche, which basically means, are you lactating? And so things like that are really just disastrous for companies, and it's hard to come back from that. But I think making sure that you're vetting your campaigns through culturally competent ad agencies and firms that can point you in the right direction. Translation is not enough. And usually with this group, we always end up talking about transcreation and transliteration. It really has to make sense. One of the examples that I have is that I worked for a large credit card company, and they had this commercial about Vikings conquering and ravaging, colonies and different areas. And they said, wouldn't this be great for the Hispanic market? And I said, no, actually it wouldn't. We're a little sensitive to this idea of colonization. We're not over it yet. You can't, put that on the air. And so, it's tough. It's tough. You don't know what you don't know. And I think that the companies that are successful in Hispanic marketings are the ones that asked more questions, are the ones that tested to make sure that they were culturally competent. More questions?
Thank you, Monica. So another question that we have on here is, what is the current percentage in Arizona of the Hispanic population to the non-Hispanic population?
So right now, Hispanics are 30%. Actually, I shouldn't say right now. Hispanics are 30% of Arizona's population. However, that really conservative number, if we look just at, Arizona population as a whole, what we know about businesses and other data, I think that number is much closer to 40%. We like to use 30% because it's a census number, which are the most conservative. We will see some new census numbers soon, but right now 30% is a pretty safe number.
And is it trending to be over 50% by 2030?
The growth certainly indicates so. We haven't plateaued. Now on immigration, we have reached, as of 2012, net zero migration, which means there are just as many people leaving Arizona as there are coming across the border. So there is that net zero migration. However, we haven't seen any downturn in the numbers. And I think what you're seeing now is that generational depth, which means Now you have more third and fourth generation versus just first and second generation.
And then what policy opportunities do you see to address the financing issues for Hispanic small businesses?
You know, this is a great question. I think that legislators are often surprised by the DATOS presentation, which concerns me a little bit, because I feel like they should be able to see that in their own, within their own constituency already. But I think from a policy standpoint, we really need legislators to step up to help small businesses, whether or not there's a pandemic. These minority businesses are the backbone of Arizona. They're growing 3 to 4 times faster despite public policy, despite immigration legislation, despite all of the barriers. So when you've got a segment that is that strong, being able to provide the resources that they need, like scaling, grants, loan policies, anything that will help them grow their businesses, things like taxes, being able to find physical locations, business licenses. The one good thing I will say that Arizona does, now that we're working in states like Nevada and Utah, the cost to start a business in Arizona is considerably lower than any other state. And that's a real benefit to small business owners, and certainly contributes to the growth. I think as we legitimize businesses, you know, there are 200 vendors at Mercado de los Cielos on 75th Street and 75th Avenue and Thomas, in an old anchor store. And those 200 are sort of pop-up vendors. It's a very low cost of entry, but whatever we can do to help them legitimize their businesses, come into the mainstream, is absolutely critical.
Thank you, Monica. So we're going to have one more question. It's actually kind of a twofer question. And then after that, you know, for the sake of time, we're probably going to close it up here. And then if you're open to it, we will email you the other questions that came through so you can answer them. So the question here is, do you have any information on how savvy the Hispanic market is in the digital space? And is digital marketing an easier or more effective way to reach the Hispanic market versus traditional marketing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So the Hispanic market is incredibly savvy. And one of the reasons is that they're early adopters to technology. For instance, in Mexico, before you had, landlines were very, very expensive and very few and far between. So cell phones really became the primary mode of communication. And so you've had a lot of early adopting. A lot of folks are more transient, just meaning that they may move around, not necessarily, you know, they move around more from place to place, whether it's to look for work or whatnot, but a cell phone is always with them. And there are a lot of companies, Coca-Cola was one of the first companies years and years ago to start testing text messaging and more digital platform type messaging. And we find that there is a greater response among Latinos because they are early adopters, and they're more likely to have mobile technology versus static, you know, sort of staying in one place. So a television, not so much for TV commercials, but rather a cell phone or a smartphone for advertising and whatnot. So because they are early adopters in technology, we do see that they are pretty savvy.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Monica.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
All right. And I believe Miss Anna is going to close us off for the day.
Okay, thank you, Taylor. And Monica, thank you once again. We really appreciate you coming and speaking with us. We always enjoy having you speak to our group, and we look forward to seeing you next year where we can actually give you a big hug like we usually do. And we do look forward to that because we do miss seeing you in person. Everyone, thank you so much for attending. I will get you this, the video of this presentation, and any questions that were not answered yet, we will ask Monica and she will answer them, and we will include that in the email. On the screen right now are some upcoming virtual events for the month of June and the month of July. What we don't have there right now is our very next event, which we will update this slide when we send the presentation to you. Wednesday, May 20th, 11:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. So it's a lunchtime event. Desiree Martinez from All in One Social Media will be presenting on content marketing strategy, 6 steps to creating effective goals. So stay tuned. We should have that on the website tomorrow or in the next day or so, and then we will get an email out so you can register. And again, it is a free webinar, so we hope to see everyone there for this event and then our upcoming events. But again, Monica, thank you very much. Taylor, thank you very much for hosting us. Everyone, Taylor is our new, Financial Potion is our new sponsor for our webinars. If you have any video needs, please feel free to reach out to Financial Potion and Taylor Wellman to help you. Otherwise, thank you everyone, and we hope to see you soon.